Evelyn sat frozen on the cold kitchen floor, her phone slipping from her trembling hand. A soft voice on the other end said, "He lied to you, just like he lied to me." The world around her went silent. In that instant, everything she believed about love, loyalty, and her marriage collapsed into pieces. Evelyn was 35, a gentle woman with warm eyes and a quiet strength. She lived in a small but cozy apartment with her husband, George, and their 2 daughters, Sophie and Lily. For 16 years, she had built her life around love, family, and routine. Every morning she prepared breakfast, packed school lunches, and waited for George to return home each evening. To everyone who knew them, they were the picture of a happy marriage. George, now 52, was respected at work and admired by neighbors. Evelyn often said that love was not about grand gestures but about staying when life became ordinary. Yet lately, she had begun to feel something changing. George worked later, smiled less, and spoke little at dinner. Sometimes, his phone would buzz in the middle of the night. Evelyn ignored the unease in her chest, believing love could not hide secrets. She was wrong. In the beginning, life with George had been peaceful and full of warmth. Evelyn still remembered the early days of their marriage when money was tight but laughter was constant. George would leave small notes on the refrigerator that said, "I love you more every day," and she would keep them tucked away in a box beside her bed. They spent weekends at the park with their daughters, Sophie and Lily, sharing ice cream, chasing bubbles, and taking photos that filled every frame on the living room wall. Evelyn believed happiness was made of simple things: shared meals, bedtime stories, and the sound of her children's laughter. George often told her, "You make this house a home," and she carried those words in her heart. Their love felt unshakable, built on years of trust and small kindnesses. But time, as it always does, began to change them. George's work became more demanding, and his absences grew longer. Dinner conversations turned quiet, replaced by the tapping of his phone and the tired sighs he brought home. Evelyn tried to ignore the distance, convincing herself that every marriage went through seasons of silence. At night, she reached for his hand, hoping to bridge the growing gap between them. Sometimes he squeezed back, sometimes he turned away, murmuring that he needed sleep. Evelyn would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering, "We're fine. We just need time." The home that once felt full of light began to feel dimmer, as though something unseen was slowly slipping away. She clung to the memories of what they had been, unaware that the love she was trying to save was already beginning to fade. It started with a sound, a quiet vibration on the table that pulled Evelyn's eyes to George's phone. A message glowed on the screen for only a moment before it disappeared, but the words were burned into her mind, "I miss you already." Her chest tightened. For a long time, she just stared at the phone, convincing herself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a coworker, a mistake, something harmless. She wanted to believe that. But late that night, when George fell asleep beside her, curiosity and fear took control. She unlocked the phone with shaking hands. The same number appeared again and again, every evening, every weekend. Dozens of messages, all deleted, but the record of calls remained. The next morning, she tried to stay calm. While he drank his coffee, she asked, "George, who keeps calling you so late?" His expression hardened. "You are imagining things, Evelyn. You always make a problem out of nothing." His voice was cold, almost irritated. Her heart sank. If he were innocent, why did he sound so angry? Days passed in uneasy silence. Then, one afternoon, when he left for work, Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, staring at the number on the phone bill. Her hand trembled as she dialed. A woman's voice answered. "Hello." Evelyn could barely speak. "This is Evelyn. I think you know my husband, George." A long pause followed. Then the woman said softly, "Oh, I didn't know you were still together." Evelyn's throat closed. "What do you mean?" "He told me you were separated," the woman said gently. "He told me that years ago, even when your first daughter was born." The phone slipped from Evelyn's hand. Her body felt numb. When George came home that evening, she stood at the door, holding the phone bill tightly. "I talked to her," she said quietly. His face turned pale, then hardened. "Why can't you let things go?" he snapped before walking past her. That night, she lay awake, listening to his steady breathing beside her. He slept peacefully, while she stared at the ceiling, unable to move. No shouting. No confessions. Just silence. In that silence, she understood the truth. Betrayal doesn't always break the heart with noise. Sometimes it dies quietly, right next to the person who promised to love you forever. After that night, the walls of their apartment felt colder, as if even the air had stopped breathing. George no longer pretended to be the man he once was. He came home later and later, sometimes not at all. When he did appear, he barely looked at her. He ate in silence, answered questions with a sigh, and scrolled through his phone until he fell asleep on the couch. Evelyn tried to hold the pieces together. "George, we can fix this. We can go to counseling, please. Think of the girls." He didn't even look up. "You're too emotional, Evelyn. You make everything harder than it needs to be." His words cut sharper than any shout. Soon, the bills piled up. George stopped leaving money for groceries and started using the family account for expensive dinners, weekend business trips, and things she never saw. Evelyn checked the statements in disbelief, her hands trembling. He was spending their savings, the future they had built together, on someone else. At night, she sat by the window, watching the city lights fade into the rain. Her youngest daughter, Lily, slept in her lap, her small breaths warm against Evelyn's arm. "I can't keep this family together alone," she whispered to the darkness. One evening, when George finally returned home, she stood in the doorway and said, "We need to talk." He sighed, already impatient. "Evelyn, there's nothing left to talk about." "Nothing left," she repeated softly. He looked at her, calm, almost relieved. "I don't love you anymore. I'm leaving." Her world stopped. He walked into the bedroom, packed a single bag, and avoided her eyes the entire time. 16 years of marriage, 2 daughters, thousands of shared moments, gone with the slow, methodical zip of a suitcase. When the door closed behind him, there was no sound except for the rain tapping against the glass. Evelyn sat at the table, staring at the chair across from her. That was where George used to read bedtime stories, where he once smiled at her over morning coffee. Now it was just an empty seat. She didn't cry. She couldn't. There was only silence, and in that silence, the echo of a life that had fallen apart. The days after George left moved in slow motion. Morning blurred into night, and night into a heavy, endless silence. Evelyn woke only because her daughters needed breakfast, school, and comfort. She smiled for them, but when they turned away, her face fell back into emptiness. The apartment felt like a shell of what it once was. The chair he used to sit in, the coffee mug he always forgot to rinse, the half-empty closet, all reminders of a man who had simply chosen to stop loving her. She tried to eat, but every meal tasted like dust. Sleep came in short, restless bursts filled with memories she didn't want to see. Sometimes, she sat by the window until sunrise, asking herself over and over, was I not enough? But life, uncaring and relentless, continued. The bills didn't stop. The girls still laughed, still called her mom, still needed her warmth. One morning, while brushing her hair, Evelyn caught her own reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, but there was something else there too, a spark of determination. "I can't fall apart," she whispered. "Not for him. Not now." Weeks later, while taking Lily to a nearby park, she passed a small cafe. Inside, through the glass, she saw George. He was laughing with a woman. The woman. Their hands touched across the table, casual, familiar. For a heartbeat, pain twisted inside her chest. But then, unexpectedly, calm followed. There were no tears this time. Just release. That night, when the girls were asleep, Evelyn opened her drawer, took off her wedding ring, and placed it gently inside a small wooden box. "I gave you 16 years, she said softly. "Now I'm giving myself the rest." The air around her felt lighter. The silence no longer hurt. It was still lonely, but now, it was a peaceful kind of lonely. And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn began to breathe again. Healing was not a single moment. It was a long, uneven journey, filled with quiet mornings, late-night tears, and the small courage to keep going. At first, Evelyn only focused on survival. She returned to work, taking a part-time job at a local bookstore. The pay was modest, but the air smelled of paper and ink, and somehow that steadied her. She spent her evenings helping Sophie with homework and braiding Lily's hair before bed. The girls' laughter became her anchor, their innocence a reminder that love could still exist in pure form. Each day she tried to do one thing just for herself: drink coffee slowly, take a walk by the river, read a few pages of an old novel. They were small things, but they stitched her together. The memories of George came less frequently. When they did, they no longer cut deep, they simply passed through, like wind through an open window. Months turned into seasons. Evelyn moved to full-time work and began saving money. She cooked more, wrote again, and even joined a community art class. It felt strange to laugh without guilt, but she let herself. One afternoon, while walking home with groceries, she saw George across the street. His hair was grayer, his face heavier, his eyes tired. For a moment, their eyes met. He smiled faintly, uncertain, almost regretful. Evelyn smiled back. Softly, kindly, but from a distance. Then she turned and kept walking. Her heart was calm. No anger. No longing. Just quiet understanding. That night, she told her daughters a bedtime story about a bird that lost its wings but learned to fly again in the wind. Sophie asked, "Was it hard for the bird to learn?" Evelyn nodded. Yes. But once it did, it never forgot how strong it really was. Later, as she sat by the window with a cup of tea, she realized the story was hers. Healing had not erased the past. It had simply transformed it, into wisdom, into strength, into freedom. She whispered into the night, "I didn't lose my life when he left. I found it." And for the first time, those words felt completely true. Evelyn's life has changed completely. Her new apartment is small, but sunlight fills every corner, and the gentle scent of fresh coffee lingers in the air each morning. The walls are decorated with her daughter's drawings and a few framed quotes that remind her how far she has come. Every day begins with laughter. She wakes the girls, makes breakfast, and plays soft music as they prepare for school. The chaos of the morning no longer feels heavy, it feels alive. In the evenings, after the girls are asleep, Evelyn writes in her journal. Not about pain, but about gratitude. About the quiet power of starting over. Sometimes she remembers George, not with bitterness, but with clarity. He was a chapter, not the whole book. The ending she once feared became the beginning she needed. She now understands that real strength is not loud or dramatic. It is found in small choices, the decision to rise, to heal, to smile again even when no one is watching. When her daughters ask about love, Evelyn tells them, "It's wonderful, but it should never make you forget who you are. Love should lift you, not erase you." Her story is no longer about betrayal or loss. It is about rebirth. About the moment a broken heart learns it can still beat strong and steady. And if she could speak to her past self, she would simply say, "You didn't lose everything. You just lost what was holding you back." Final message to the audience. Even when life shatters your heart, remember, pain is not the end. It is the doorway to strength. Would you forgive the one who hurt you, or would you choose to begin again? If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more emotional English stories.